In this video, we will be debunking the concept put before us by Ibram Kendi about babies being racist. Can they be? The short answer is no. It can be argued that the human proclivity towards language is so great because it is the fundamental basis on which our species is able to survive. Without the complexities of language that can express abstract thought, we would not be able to convey the visions and thoughts of our mind to others so as to add a communal whole, or add to a communal whole, I should say. The human capacity for invention and learning would be so severely restricted without language that not only would you not be reading any book, but your culture would have progressed no further than that of a hunter-gatherer. This is not to say that hunter-gatherers are not advanced. However, to build highly complex societies, a highly complex communication system is required. Regardless of the ethnic group, culture, or other factors that determine a group of people, there is no group of people who do not use language in some form. In cases where people are deaf, the basic biological drive to create language and communicate is so strong that even in the absence of sign language, many communities will spontaneously develop their own sign languages. The biological axiom of language learning in humans begins in an automated process which, as it progresses, becomes more and more complex in a snowball effect. An amazing array of both biological processes and macro-environmental stimuli combine in order to create language. Beyond this, it forges the individual's very understanding of the world as they develop. How does this process happen? Well, even before we are born, during prenatal development, the stage for language learning is already being set. Think about when a baby is born. What is the ratio of a baby's head to the ratio of a baby's body? When not including the size of legs, a baby's head is about half the size of its body. Now, the reason for this is highly practical. One thing that sets humans aside and makes us stand out from every other species on the planet is the unique formation of our brain. At the prenatal stage, the neurons have already actively been growing, which means they have been set in a basic template to begin learning from the very moment of birth. And that means that there needs to be a certain default amount of brain volume to begin the process. Now, remember, neurons have been actively growing in the prenatal stage, and there are now more neurons than are actually needed. So something needs to happen in order to place neurons in the right set of connections. First, let's consider the basic construction of a neuron. A neuron has a cell body, and on the cell body, it may have or may not have dendrites, which receive electrochemical messages from other neurons. Each neuron has a long tail called an axon, and the action on the tail is the method for relaying messages to another neuron. The axon of a neuron can be up to about 1 meter in length and can relay messages at the top speed of 150 meters per second. At birth, these axons are in a somewhat random layout. As we understand it now, that may actually change in a few years. If the baby is a male, this layout would have been set by the level of testosterone during development. And if the baby is female, the basic layout is set by levels of estrogen. For this reason, we see slight differences in the speed which the two genders acquire language. Certain sections within the brain which control speech development at earlier stages for females is in place, and due to the presence of hormones during development, outside of very extreme and rare cases or genetic mutations, a male baby will always have a male brain and a female baby will always have a female brain. I'm sorry if you think otherwise, but you're incorrect. From birth, to about 6 months of age, human babies will begin rapidly absorbing information from the environment, even though they are unable to communicate with words. This does not mean that they are not learning. They are literally like sponges, absorbing all the information around them. And at this time, the brain and the connections of the neurons are developing. The baby will most likely be the most receptive to the voice of its mother, because during the prenatal stage, the baby can actually hear its mother's voice and the voices in its surrounding. This means it is possible that it may recognize the voices of its close family members more quickly if these have been present during the different stages of pregnancy. The baby will soon begin to understand very simple structures of language. And by simple, I mean very simple. It's not the understanding of words or sentences per se, but rather the tone of voice and emotion contained within the voice. The baby begins to recognize things like happiness or anger. So if someone is laughing, the baby may laugh, but if someone seems upset, the baby is likely to cry. This is an important step in developing because emotion and language are intrinsically linked in the human mind. During this stage, the baby may slowly begin to recognize the language of its parents because the tone and patterns of their voices have been a constant feature at that time. And that means that the baby is more likely to pay attention to individuals who speak that particular language to the baby. This type of pattern recognition happens during the first stage of learning and is the recognition that there is a pattern. Now, after this recognition of a pattern, the actual progression to becoming cognizant of meaning can take place. So there's no evidence to suggest, as certain scholars have, like Ibram Kendi, that babies take any notice of things such as ethnicity or race. Rather, it is the familiarity with the tone of voice and the pattern of speech which draws the baby's attention to the speaker. And therefore, it is a faux pas to assume that this is due to the color of skin. In terms of basic survival, the recognition of skin tone or ethnicity on the part of the child is not a prerequisite for continuing existence. From birth, children are programmed for one thing: to learn language. That's what they do. They can't even move. They're just learning language. So, babies don't care about race. They care about language. If you like this, check out my book. It's chock-a-block full of amazing stuff.